My name is Katherine, and I'm 34 years old. Last Christmas Eve, I drove 3 hours through the snow with my 8-year-old daughter Emma sleeping in the back seat, her little arms wrapped around the teddy bear she'd had since she was 2. She'd spent weeks making homemade gifts for her grandparents, carefully drawing pictures and baking cookies shaped like snowmen. As we pulled into my parents' driveway, the warm glow from their windows made everything seem perfect. Emma stirred awake, her eyes bright with excitement. "We're at Grandma's house, Mummy," she squealed. I helped her out and we walked up to the front door together. Before I continue with what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from this holiday season. If stories about family and standing up for what's right touch your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe. Because what happened when that door opened changed our lives forever. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, I thought I understood what family meant. My father worked as an accountant for a firm in Hartford, always home by 6 sharp, while my mother taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. Our house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac with a perfectly manicured lawn and a white picket fence that my mother insisted on repainting every spring. I was the youngest of 2 children, with my brother Daniel 5 years older than me. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family, the kind you'd see in holiday commercials or church pamphlets. Daniel was everything my parents wanted in a child. He excelled at everything he touched. Straight A's through high school, captain of the debate team, accepted into Harvard on a full scholarship. When he graduated from law school and joined a prestigious firm in Manhattan, my parents threw a party that lasted until 2 in the morning. They invited everyone they knew, eager to show off their golden child. He married Jennifer, a pediatrician from a wealthy family in Greenwich, and they bought a colonial house just 20 minutes from my parents. Their wedding was featured in the local society pages, and my mother kept the clipping framed in the living room. I took a different path. While Daniel was arguing cases in courtrooms, I was studying art at a small liberal arts college in Vermont. My parents never understood why I wanted to paint instead of pursuing something practical. "Your brother is making 6 figures, my father would say during every phone call home. "What are you going to do with paintbrushes and canvas?" My mother was gentler, but no less disapproving. "Art is a lovely hobby, dear, but you need to think about your future." They came to my graduation, but I could see the disappointment in their eyes when I walked across that stage with my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. I met Marcus when I was 24 at a gallery opening in Burlington, where I was showing 3 of my pieces. He was magnetic in a way that made everyone in the room turn when he laughed. An artist himself, he worked with metal sculptures that seemed to defy gravity. We talked until the gallery closed to Marcin, then continued our conversation at an all-night diner discussing Rothko and Basquiat over coffee that grew cold as the hours passed. He understood my work in a way no one else ever had, seeing the emotions I tried to capture in abstract swirls of color. When I brought Marcus home to meet my parents 6 months later, the tension was immediate. He didn't have a steady job, preferring to take commissions when inspiration struck. His hair was longer than my father liked, and he wore a leather jacket that my mother eyed with obvious distaste. At dinner, when Marcus excitedly described his latest installation piece, my father interrupted to ask about his 5-year plan. Marcus laughed and said, "Art didn't follow corporate timelines." The silence that followed felt like it lasted an hour. After Marcus left that weekend, my parents sat me down in the living room. Katherine, my mother, began, her hands folded carefully in her lap. "We're concerned about this relationship. He seems nice enough, but he's not stable. How would he support a family?" My father was more direct. "He's not good enough for you. You could do so much better. Someone with ambition, with a real career. Someone like Jennifer's brother, the investment banker I mentioned last month." But I was in love deeply and completely. Marcus made me feel alive in ways I'd never experienced. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony at a friend's farm. My parents attended, but their smiles in the wedding photos looked forced. Daniel gave a toast that felt more like a warning than a celebration, talking about the importance of choosing partners who share your values and goals. My mother cried, but not the happy tears mothers usually shed at weddings. Emma arrived a year after our wedding, born on a rainy April morning. She had Marcus's dark eyes and my stubborn chin. For a brief moment, I thought her arrival might soften my parents' attitude. They visited the hospital, and my mother held Emma with something approaching tenderness. "She's beautiful," she whispered. But even then, I heard the underlying message when she added, "I hope she brings you both the stability you need." The first few years were actually good. Marcus seemed energized by fatherhood, creating whimsical mobiles for Emma's nursery and singing her to sleep with made-up songs. He got steady work at a local gallery, handling installations and teaching weekend workshops. We rented a small apartment near the university, and while money was tight, we were happy. Emma took her first steps in our tiny kitchen chasing after our cat and said her first word while Marcus was showing her how to finger paint. But gradually, things began to shift. The gallery cut his hours, then eliminated his position entirely. Marcus started drinking more, first just beer with dinner, then whiskey in his coffee, then straight from the bottle when he thought I wasn't looking. He stopped creating art, saying the inspiration had dried up. He'd disappear for hours sometimes overnight, always with elaborate explanations that made less sense each time. The man who once stayed up all night discussing dreams with me now fell asleep on the couch before Emma's bedtime. I tried to hold everything together. I took on freelance design work, creating logos and websites late into the night after Emma was asleep. I made excuses to my parents when Marcus missed family dinners. I pretended not to notice the credit card bills he hid in his studio, or the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes anymore. I thought if I just loved him enough, if I just gave him time, he'd find his way back to the person he used to be. The breaking point came when Emma was 5. I'd come home early from a client meeting that had been cancelled. Emma was at preschool and Marcus was supposed to be at a job interview. Instead, I found him in our bed with Cheryl, the yoga instructor, from the studio downstairs. The cliche of it all might have been funny if it hadn't been so devastating. They didn't even hear me come in. I stood in the doorway for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds watching my marriage officially end. The divorce was swift and brutal. Marcus didn't fight for custody, didn't even ask for visitation rights. He signed the papers with the same casual indifference he'd shown toward our marriage in its final months. He moved to Portland with Cheryl 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. The last thing he said to me was that maybe this was for the best, that he wasn't cut out for the suburban dad thing anyway. Emma asked about him for months afterward. Where did Daddy go? When is he coming back? Each question felt like a fresh wound. When I told my parents about the divorce sitting in their pristine living room while Emma played in the yard, their reaction was exactly what I'd feared. My mother's first words weren't of comfort, but of condemnation. We told you so, Katherine. We warned you about him from the beginning. My father was even harsher. This is what happens when you make emotional decisions instead of logical ones. You should have listened to us. You could have married someone stable, someone successful. Now look where you are, a single mother with no real career. They offered no comfort, no shoulder to cry on, no reassurance that everything would be okay. Instead, they listed all the ways I'd failed, all the opportunities I'd wasted, all the warnings I'd ignored. When I started crying, my mother sighed and said, "Tears won't fix this, Katherine. You made your bed." The rest of the saying hung unspoken in the air. Daniel and Jennifer came over during this conversation, and I watched them exchange knowing looks. Poor Katherine, always making the wrong choices. In the months that followed, every interaction with my parents became an exercise in endurance. Sunday dinners turned into lectures about responsibility. Phone calls became inventories of my failures. They'd make comments in front of Emma about how different things could have been if Mommy had made better choices. They'd buy her expensive gifts, then tell her she could have nice things all the time if only her mother had married someone successful like Uncle Daniel. But through it all, Emma remained my light. She had a resilience that amazed me, adapting to our new life with a grace that many adults couldn't manage. She made friends easily at her new school, threw herself into art classes with an enthusiasm that reminded me why I'd loved painting in the first place. She'd crawl into my bed on the nights when the loneliness felt overwhelming and tell me stories about brave princesses who didn't need princes to save them. As Christmas approached that year, Emma became consumed with excitement about seeing her grandparents. Despite their coldness toward me, they'd always maintained a relationship with her, though it felt more like they were trying to save her from my influence than genuinely loving her for who she was. She spent 2 weeks working on presents for them, painting a picture of my mother's garden from memory, complete with the roses my mother obsessed over every summer. She made ornaments from popsicle sticks and glitter, each one unique and blazing with colour. The night before Christmas Eve, Emma could barely sleep. She kept asking if Grandma would like the cookies she'd made if Grandpa would hang her picture in his office. I assured her they would love everything, pushing down the knot of anxiety in my stomach. I'd called my mother earlier that week to confirm we were coming. She'd been brief, almost cold, but hadn't said not to come. That had to count for something, I told myself. The drive to my parents' house took 3 hours through steadily falling snow. Emma sang Christmas carols for the first hour, making up words when she couldn't remember the real ones. She fell asleep clutching the bag of presents she'd wrapped herself, the paper crooked, but secured with excessive amounts of tape. The GPS led us through familiar streets that looked magical under the blanket of white. Other houses blazed with lights and decorations, inflatable Santas waving from front yards. When we finally pulled into my parents' driveway, every window in their house glowed with warm light. I could see the Christmas tree through the living room window, decorated with the same ornaments they'd used since my childhood. The angel on top had been my grandmother's passed down through generations. Cars lined the driveway, including Daniel's BMW and several others I recognized as belonging to aunts and uncles. The house looked exactly as it had every Christmas of my childhood, inviting and warm. Emma bounced awake the moment I turned off the engine, her face pressed against the window. "Look at all the lights, Mummy," she exclaimed. "Do you think everyone's here? Is Uncle Daniel here? Are Bobby and James here?" She was already unbuckling her seatbelt, eager to see her cousins. I helped her out of the car, making sure she had her bag of presents. The snow had stopped falling, leaving everything covered in a pristine layer of white that sparkled under the porch light. We walked up the familiar stone path, Emma practically vibrating with excitement beside me. She'd dressed herself that morning in her favourite red dress, with the velvet ribbon, the one she saved for special occasions. Her black patent shoes clicked against the steps as we climbed onto the porch. Through the door's frosted glass panels, I could see shadows moving inside, hear the muffled sound of laughter and conversation. It sounded like the whole family had gathered just as they did every year. I rang the doorbell, the Westminster chimes echoing through the house as they had for 30 years. Emma stood on her tiptoes trying to see through the glass. Footsteps approached from inside the familiar click of my mother's heels on the hardwood floor. The lock turned and the door opened, bringing with it a wave of warm air scented with cinnamon and pine. My mother stood there in her burgundy Christmas dress, the one she wore every year, pearl necklace perfectly positioned. But her face held no warmth. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something beyond disappointment, beyond anger. It was like she was looking at a stranger who'd shown up uninvited to a private party. Her gaze moved past me entirely as if I wasn't even there, then settled on Emma with something that might have been pity but felt more like disgust. The smile I'd expected the arms that should have opened for a hug remained closed and cold. Grandma Emma chirped, oblivious to the tension. "Merry Christmas, I made you something special." She held up her bag of presents, her face glowing with anticipation. But my mother didn't reach for the gifts. She didn't bend down to Emma's level as she usually did. Instead, she turned her head toward the inside of the house and called out in a flat voice, "Richard, you need to come here." My father appeared moments later dressed in his Christmas vest, the one with the subtle holly pattern that he thought was festive without being gaudy. He looked between my mother and us, his jaw tightening in a way I recognized from childhood, the expression he wore when about to deliver particularly harsh discipline. Behind him, I could see into the living room where Daniel and Jennifer sat with their two boys, my Aunt Carol and Uncle Tom, on the opposite sofa. They all turned to look at the doorway, but no one made any move to greet us. "Katherine," my father said, his voice carrying that formal tone he used with clients he was about to disappoint. "We need to talk." He didn't invite us in, didn't step aside to let us enter. Emma and I stood on the porch in the cold while the warmth of the house escaped around us. Emma's excitement began to falter. She pressed closer to my leg, confused by the lack of welcome. The bag of presents lowered slowly to her side. I started to speak to ask what was happening, but my father held up his hand. "We've been discussing this as a family," he said, and I realized he meant the family inside, the one that apparently no longer included us. "After your divorce, and the shame you've brought to this family, after all the opportunities you've wasted, and the poor decisions you've continued to make, we think it's best if we maintain our distance. You're not the daughter we raised. You're not the person we hoped you'd become." The words hit like physical blows, each one carefully chosen for maximum impact. But what came next was worse. Emma Sweet, Emma, who'd done nothing wrong, who'd spent weeks making gifts with her little hands, stepped forward with the innocence of a child who still believed in the goodness of grandparents. "Grandpa," she said, her voice small but hopeful, "I made this for you. It's a bookmark with your initials. You can use it for your big books." My father looked down at her, and the coldness in his eyes made me want to grab her and run. "We're not accepting gifts," he said flatly. My mother nodded, adding words that would echo in my mind for years to come. "You two aren't family anymore. Real family doesn't break apart like you did. Real family makes smart choices. Real family listens to wisdom and guidance. You chose your path, Katherine, and it led you away from us." Emma's face crumpled in slow-motion confusion, giving way to hurt. "But I'm your granddaughter," she whispered, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. "I didn't do anything wrong. I've been good. I got all A's on my report card. I helped Mummy with chores. Why don't you want my presents? Why don't you want me?" Her voice broke on the last word and she began to sob, the kind of deep, bewildered crying that comes when a child's understanding of the world shatters. From inside the house, I heard my nephew Bobby ask loudly, "Who's at the door? Dad, why is someone crying?" Daniel's response carried clearly through the doorway. "Nobody important, son. Just some people who got confused about the guest list. Go back to your game." The casualness of it, the easy dismissal of his own sister and niece, cut deeper than my parents' formal rejection. This had been planned, discussed, decided before we'd even arrived. My mother straightened her shoulders, preparing to deliver what she clearly thought would be the final blow. "Unless you're ready to admit all your mistakes," she said, "unless you're prepared to beg for our forgiveness, for embarrassing us, for throwing away everything we gave you, for refusing to live up to your potential, then there's nothing more to discuss. We expected better from you, Katherine. We gave you everything, and you threw it all away for that artist, for that lifestyle." She paused, waiting. They both waited. I understood suddenly what this was about. They expected me to break to crumble, to get on my knees right there on their porch and beg for their acceptance. They wanted Emma to see me humiliated, to understand that Mommy's choices had consequences. They wanted me to admit they'd been right all along, that I was a failure, that I needed them more than they needed me. The presents scattered on the porch, the tears on Emma's face, the cold seeping through our coats, it was all part of their orchestrated lesson. My father cleared his throat. "Well," he said, "what do you have to say for yourself? Your mother and I are busy. We have real family inside waiting for us. If you're not ready to show proper remorse, then you should leave. Don't come back until you're ready to act like the daughter we tried to raise, not the disappointment you've become." He started to close the door, but my mother stopped him, wanting to twist the knife one more time. "You know, Katherine," she said, "Daniel told us you've been struggling financially. Can barely afford that apartment," he says. "Maybe if you'd listened to us, if you'd married someone appropriate, Emma wouldn't have to suffer for your pride. Think about that while you're alone on Christmas. Think about what you're doing to that innocent child." She looked at Emma one more time, and I swear I saw satisfaction in her eyes at my daughter's tears. The door began to close, and I heard the laughter from inside get louder, as if someone had told a particularly funny joke. Through the narrowing gap I glimpsed the Christmas tree, the presents piled underneath it, the abundance that Emma and I were being denied. My parents stood united in the doorway, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to choose my need for them over my own dignity, waiting for me to teach my daughter that love came with conditions, that family could be earned or lost based on someone else's approval. I looked down at Emma, my beautiful daughter standing in the snow with tears freezing on her cheeks, her carefully wrapped presents scattered at her feet, and something inside me that had been bending for years finally snapped back into place. This child, this innocent soul, who had spent weeks pouring love into handmade gifts, who had practiced writing her grandparents' names in careful cursive on each tag, deserved so much more than conditional love. She deserved more than grandparents who would use her as a weapon against her mother. I knelt down in the snow, ignoring the cold seeping through my jeans, and pulled Emma into my arms. She buried her face in my shoulder, her small body shaking with sobs. "Baby, look at me," I said softly, waiting until her tear-filled eyes met mine. "We're leaving. We're going to have our own Christmas, a better Christmas, with people who love us for exactly who we are." Her arms tightened around my neck, and I stood up, lifting her with me, feeling the strength that comes from protecting someone you love more than yourself. I faced my parents, who still stood in the doorway with expressions of smug expectation. My mother had actually started tapping her foot, impatient for the groveling she assumed was coming. My father had his arms crossed, the pose he used to intimidate junior associates at his firm. Behind them, the warm glow of their perfect Christmas with their perfect son and his perfect family continued without us. And in that moment, I found my voice, not the apologetic whisper they expected, but something stronger. "You're right," I said, my voice steady and clear. "We're not family anymore. Family doesn't treat children like this. Family doesn't stand in doorways on Christmas Eve and watch a little girl cry without feeling anything. Family doesn't demand perfection as the price of love. Family doesn't use shame as currency or mistakes as weapons. You've shown me tonight exactly who you are, and you're right, we don't belong here. We never did." My mother's mouth fell open, the smug expression replaced by shock. My father started to speak. "Katherine, don't be ridiculous," but I cut him off. "I'm not being ridiculous. I'm being a mother. Something you seem to have forgotten how to be. Emma and I are leaving, and we won't be back. Not until you can look at your granddaughter and see her for the amazing person she is, not as some extension of my failures in your eyes. Not until you can accept that love isn't something to be earned by meeting your standards. I bent down and picked up one of Emma's presents from the ground, the painting of my mother's garden. I held it up for them to see. She worked on this for 2 weeks, I said. She remembered every flower, every bush, because she loves you. But you can't see that, can you? All you can see is your disappointment in me. So we're done. I'm done trying to earn something that should be freely given. I'm done letting you hurt her to punish me. My mother found her voice then sharp and accusatory. You're just going to walk away without fighting for your family, without trying to fix this. You're going to deprive Emma of her grandparents because of your pride. This is exactly the kind of selfish decision we expected from you, running away instead of facing reality. My father nodded in agreement, adding, "You'll regret this, Katherine. When you're struggling alone, when Emma asks why she can't see us, you'll remember this moment." I looked at them one last time. These people who had raised me, who had once claimed to love me, who now stood united in their rejection of their own daughter and granddaughter. I am fighting for my family, I said. My real family. The one that consists of me and Emma and the people who love us without conditions. You made your choice tonight. You chose your pride, your image, your idea of perfection over your granddaughter's tears. That's something Emma and I will both remember. Emma lifted her head from my shoulder then, and in a voice still thick with tears, but suddenly strong, she said, "You're mean. My mommy is the best mommy in the world, and you're mean to her. I don't want presents from mean people. Santa doesn't bring presents to mean people." The innocence of her defense, the pure loyalty in her voice nearly broke me, but it also filled me with a pride so fierce it burned through the cold. Without another word, I turned and walked away, carrying Emma, leaving the scattered presents on their porch like abandoned dreams. Behind us, I heard my mother call out, "Katherine, don't be dramatic. You'll come crawling back. You always do." But I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing any doubt on my face. Each step away from their door felt like shedding a weight I'd carried for 34 years. As I buckled Emma into her car seat, she whispered, "Why don't they love us, Mummy? Why don't they want my presents?" I kissed her forehead, tasting the salt of her tears. "They don't know how to love properly, baby. Some people think love has to be earned, that it comes with rules and conditions. But real love, the kind I have for you, the kind you have for me, doesn't work that way. Real love just is no matter what." I started the car and drove away from my childhood home for what I knew would be the last time. In the rearview mirror, I saw my parents still standing in the doorway, backlit by their perfect Christmas, probably already crafting the story they'd tell the relatives inside. Poor Katherine, always so difficult. We tried to help, but she's too proud. As we turned the corner, they disappeared from view, and with them, the last of my obligation to keep trying to earn their approval. The snow had started falling again, soft flakes that danced in the headlights. Emma had stopped crying, but I could hear her sniffling in the back seat. "Mommy," she said after a few minutes, "are we going to be alone on Christmas?" The question hung in the air like the snowflakes, delicate and potentially heartbreaking. I glanced at her in the mirror, seeing her small face illuminated by passing streetlights, and made a decision. "No, sweetheart," I said, reaching for my phone at the next red light. "We're not going to be alone. We're going to be with people who actually love us." I scrolled through my contacts and found Maria's number. Maria had been my friend since our kids started preschool together. She'd held me through the divorce, brought wine and tissues on the worst nights, never once judging my choices. The phone rang twice before her warm voice filled the car through the Bluetooth. "Katherine, Merry Christmas Eve. How did it go with your parents?" The concern in her voice told me she'd been worrying about us all evening. I took a breath, then said simply, "Not well. We're in the car. They wouldn't even let us in." There was a pause. Then Maria's voice came back fierce and protective. "You bring that baby here right now. We have plenty of room, plenty of food, and plenty of love. Don't you dare spend Christmas alone." In the back seat, Emma perked up slightly. "Can we really go to Sophia's house?" she asked. Sophia was Maria's daughter, one of Emma's best friends. When I confirmed we could, I saw the first hint of a smile return to her face. That moment, that tiny smile reinforced that I'd made the right choice. My parents could keep their conditional love, their perfect standards, their pristine house full of approved family members. Emma and I would find our own way. The 15-minute drive to Maria's house felt like crossing from winter into spring. Her home, a cozy colonial on the other side of town, blazed with multicolored lights that blinked in cheerful chaos, rather than the coordinated elegance of my parents' display. An inflatable Santa waved from the front yard, slightly deflated on one side, but still smiling. Through the windows I could see movement shadows of people laughing, living, loving, without conditions or prerequisites. Before I could even knock, the door flew open and Maria stood there, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, flour dusting her Christmas sweater. She took one look at Emma's tear-stained face and pulled us both into a fierce hug that smelled of cinnamon rolls and pine needles. "Don't say a word," she whispered to me. "Just come in and be loved. That's all you need to do tonight." Behind her, her husband Carlos waved from the kitchen and Sophia came running down the hallway. Emma Sophia squealed. "Come see what Santa brought early. You can play with everything." Emma looked up at me uncertain, still carrying the hurt from my parents' rejection. I nodded encouragingly and slowly she let Sophia take her hand and lead her toward the living room. Maria kept her arm around me, guiding me inside, where warmth hit me like a physical embrace. The house was full, not just with Maria's immediate family, but with her parents, her sister's family, and several other friends who had nowhere else to go. Maria's mother, Rosa, immediately stood up from the couch and came over, taking my face in her weathered hands. "Mija," she said, "though I wasn't her daughter, you are always welcome here. Family is not just blood. Family is who shows up. Family is who opens the door. You understand?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She patted my cheek and said, "Now you eat. Too skinny." "Come." The dining table was a study in organized chaos, covered with dishes that represented 3 different cultures and twice as many family recipes. Carlos was adding another plate setting while Maria's sister shuffled everything to make room. No one asked why we were there. No one questioned why we'd left my parents' house. They simply absorbed us into their celebration as if we'd always belonged there. Emma was already laughing with Sophia and the other children, the resilience of childhood allowing her to bounce back faster than any adult could. As I sat down at the table, Carlos handed me a glass of wine and said quietly, "Maria told me a little about your parents. My father was the same way. Haven't spoken to him in 10 years. Best decision I ever made. Some people think blood means you have to accept poison. It doesn't." I looked around the table at this chosen family, these people who had welcomed us without question, and felt something inside me begin to thaw. The meal was unlike any Christmas dinner I'd ever experienced at my parents' house. Their conversation was carefully modulated topics, vetted for appropriateness, children seen but not heard. Here everyone talked over everyone else, children interrupted with excitement about their presence, and Rosa kept insisting everyone needed more food on their plates. When Emma shyly showed Rosa the cookies she'd made, the older woman acted as if they were the most precious gift she'd ever received. "These are for your grandparents," Rosa asked, examining the carefully decorated snowmen. Emma's face fell slightly. "They were, but they didn't want them." Rosa made a disapproving sound in her throat. "Then they are fools and we are lucky. These cookies belong on our dessert table, made by a true artist. Emma, you will help me arrange them." Emma beamed, and I watched my daughter bloom under the warmth of genuine appreciation. After dinner, the children performed an impromptu Christmas pageant they'd thrown together in the playroom. Emma, despite everything she'd been through that evening, volunteered to be an angel. Maria's sister found an old costume that was too big, the wings drooping comically, but Emma wore it with such pride that she might as well have been dressed by heaven itself. When she sang her part off-key and mixed with giggles, every adult watched with genuine delight. Later, as the evening wound down, I found myself on the back porch with Maria watching the snow fall through the porch light. Inside, Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, curled up with Sophia and 2 other children looking completely at peace. Maria lit a cigarette she'd quit years ago, but kept for emergencies and said, "You know they're going to try to contact you. Your parents. Once they realize you're not coming back, they'll panic." I know I said already, dreading the calls and messages that would surely come, but I'm done, Maria. I'm done trying to earn their love. I'm done letting them hurt Emma to prove some point about my failures. Tonight, watching them look at her tears and feel nothing, I finally understood. They're not capable of the kind of love she deserves, the kind every child deserves. Maria nodded, blowing smoke into the cold air. "My mother once told me," Maria said, "that when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Your parents have been showing you who they are for years. Tonight they finally showed Emma too. As horrible as that is, maybe it's better she knows now when she's young enough to heal than later when it would shape her more deeply. Children are resilient when they have at least one person who loves them unconditionally. Emma has you." We stayed until well past midnight, Emma sleeping through the transition from Maria's couch to the car to her own bed. As I tucked her in, she stirred slightly and whispered, "Mommy, can we have Christmas with Sophia's family every year?" I smoothed her hair back and promised we'd have Christmas with people who loved us, whatever that looked like. She smiled in her sleep, and I sat there watching her breathe this child who'd been rejected by blood but embraced by strangers. My phone had been silent all evening, but when I finally checked it, there were 3 missed calls from my mother and a voicemail from my father. I deleted them without listening. There was also a text from Daniel that said simply, "You made a scene." Mom's upset. I deleted that too. Whatever they had to say, whatever guilt or manipulation they wanted to deploy, could wait. Tonight was about choosing joy over judgment, acceptance over approval. I made myself tea and sat in the living room looking at our small Christmas tree with its hodgepodge of ornaments, many made by Emma over the years. It wasn't perfect or coordinated like my parents' tree. Some of the lights were out and the star on top tilted to the left, but it was ours, decorated with love and memories that didn't come with conditions. Every ornament told a story of just Emma and me building our life together without needing anyone's approval. As Christmas Day dawned, Emma woke up to find that Santa had indeed come, despite our change in plans. Maria had secretly given me a bag of gifts her family had prepared for Emma, knowing we might need them. My daughter's joy at the simple presents, art supplies and books and a new doll was pure and uncomplicated. She didn't mention my parents once, as if the evening at Maria's had overwritten the earlier rejection. We spent Christmas Day in our pajamas making pancakes and watching movies, creating our own traditions. Emma painted a picture of our celebration, and in it, she drew Maria's family around our table. "This is our real family," she announced. "The people who wanted us there. The people who liked my cookies." At 5 years old, she understood something it had taken me 3 decades to learn. Family isn't about blood or obligation or meeting someone's standards. It's about choosing to love and be loved freely and without conditions. The silence from my parents lasted exactly 36 hours. On the morning of December 26th, my phone began its assault. 15 missed calls from my mother by noon, each voicemail more indignant than the last. "Your father and I are very disappointed in your behavior," the first one said. Walking away like that was childish and dramatic. The 5th message had shifted to, "Your father is upset. You know his blood pressure. How could you do this to us on Christmas?" By the 10th, she was saying, "Everyone's asking where you went. What am I supposed to tell them?" My father left only one voicemail, his tone measured and corporate, as if he was dealing with a difficult client. "Katherine, your mother is distressed by your unnecessary theatrics. We expected better from you. We're willing to discuss this misunderstanding, but you need to apologize for your behavior and for upsetting the entire family gathering. Call us back within the next 24 hours, or we'll have to consider this relationship terminated." The threat might have scared me once. Now it just sounded hollow. Then came the extended family. Aunt Carol called first, her voice dripping with false concern. "Katherine, dear, your mother told us what happened. She's heartbroken. You really should apologize. Family is everything you know. Whatever little disagreement you had, it's not worth destroying your relationship with your parents. Think of Emma. She needs her grandparents." The hypocrisy of it burned. Where was this concern for Emma when she was crying on their porch? Uncle Tom left a message that was less subtle. "Your parents did everything for you, Katherine. Private schools, college education, a beautiful wedding they paid for, and this is how you repay them. By making a scene and storming off, you need to grow up and appreciate what you have. Some of us would have killed for parents like yours." I wanted to call back and ask if he'd also have killed for parents who rejected his child, but I didn't. Silence. I was learning was more powerful than arguments. The most surprising call came from my cousin Sarah, who had always seemed to understand my situation. "Katherine, I heard what happened. Look, I get it. Your parents can be difficult, but you have to think practically here. Emma deserves to know her grandparents. And honestly, can you afford to cut them off? I know things have been tight since the divorce. Don't let pride cost Emma opportunities." The assumption that I would sell my daughter's emotional well-being for financial security made me sick. But the most painful message came from Daniel. It was brief and cutting. "You've upset Mum terribly. She had to take one of her pills. Dad's talking about changing his will. I hope you're happy with yourself. You always were selfish even as a kid. Now Emma's going to pay for your stubbornness. Grow up, Katherine." The brother who had once built blanket forts with me, who had protected me from bullies in elementary school, had fully become our parents' son. The transformation was complete. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I blocked my parents' numbers and set the rest to go straight to voicemail. Emma didn't need to hear the phone ringing constantly, didn't need to sense the pressure building around us. When she asked if we could call Grandma and Grandpa, to thank them for presents that never came, I told her they were travelling. The lie tasted bitter but felt necessary. She accepted it with the easy trust of childhood and went back to playing with her new toys. 3 days after Christmas, the letters started arriving. First a formal one from my father typed on his office letterhead, as if this was a business negotiation. It outlined my failures as a daughter, starting from my choice of college major and culminating in what he called the Christmas incident. He offered terms for reconciliation that included a written apology, family counselling with their chosen therapist, and a promise to raise Emma according to their values and standards. The letter ended with a deadline, giving me 1 week to respond before they would proceed with removing me from their will entirely. My mother's letter was handwritten on her monogrammed stationery, the same paper she used for thank you notes after dinner parties. It was 8 pages of emotional manipulation disguised as maternal concern. She wrote about the sacrifices they'd made, the dreams they'd had for me, the embarrassment I'd caused them. She mentioned that several friends had asked about our absence from Christmas dinner and how humiliated she'd been to make excuses. Not once in 8 pages did she mention Emma's tears or acknowledge their role in what happened. Then came the social media campaign. My mother, who had barely understood Facebook a year ago, suddenly became prolific at posting photos of Daniel's perfect family at Christmas with captions like, "So blessed to have family who values togetherness," quotes about ungrateful children and the pain of parental love. She even posted old photos of me as a child with captions like, "Missing happier times when family meant everything." The comment sections filled with her friends offering sympathy and sharing their own stories of difficult children. Daniel's wife Jennifer, who had never liked me anyway, posted her own version of events. "Some people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone," she wrote alongside a photo of their family at my parents' house. "So grateful for the family we choose to be part of." The passive aggression was thick enough to cut, and mutual friends began reaching out, having seen the post asking what had happened. I told them simply that we'd decided to celebrate separately this year and left it at that. The whisper campaign in my parents' social circle was swift and brutal. I heard about it from Mrs. Chen at the grocery store, who had always been kind to me. She pulled me aside near the produce section and said quietly, "Your mother's been telling everyone you're having some kind of breakdown. Says the divorce affected you more than anyone realized. That you're keeping Emma from them out of spite. I just thought you should know what's being said." I thanked her, but inside I felt the familiar burn of anger. Emma started asking questions when a playdate was suddenly cancelled. The mother, someone who moved in my parents' circle, texted that they were busy, but I knew better. Another family we'd been friendly with became distant at school pickup. The sins of the mother apparently extended to the child. I watched Emma's confusion when her friend's mum pulled him away from her at the playground, and I wanted to rage at the unfairness of it all, but I kept smiling, kept telling Emma that sometimes people get busy, that it had nothing to do with her. A week into January, I received an email from my father's lawyer, someone I'd known since childhood, who used to give me candy when I visited my father's office. The email was formal, outlining that I had been removed from both wills and any family trusts. It also mentioned that they would no longer be contributing to the college fund they'd started for Emma. The money apparently would be redistributed to Daniel's children who were being raised properly. The lawyer added a personal note at the end saying he was sorry things had come to this. I wondered if he knew the whole story or just their version. The financial threat might have worked if I hadn't already been surviving without their help for years. The college fund, while it would have been nice, wasn't something I'd been counting on. I'd learned long ago that their money came with strings that could strangle you. Emma and I would figure it out on our own, just as we'd figured out everything else. There was freedom in having nothing left for them to take away, no leverage left for them to use. But the cruelest blow came when Emma's birthday approached in April. A card arrived in the mail addressed to her in my mother's perfect handwriting. Inside was a generic message, the kind you'd send to a distant acquaintance's child, signed formally grandfather and grandmother. No personal message, no mention of love, just their titles as if asserting their position. Emma looked at it confused. "Why did they sign it like that?" she asked. "Why don't they say love?" I told her some people show feelings differently though. The truth was they weren't showing feelings at all, just maintaining appearances. The last direct communication came in July, 6 months after that Christmas Eve. My mother called from a different number, catching me off guard. Her voice was different, smaller somehow. "Katherine," she said, "we're willing to discuss moving forward. Your father and I think enough time has passed. We're prepared to accept you back into the family, provided you acknowledge your mistakes and agree to our terms. We'll even consider allowing supervised visits with Emma." The magnanimity in her voice, as if they were doing us a favor, made my decision even easier. I told her no. Simply, clearly, without anger or explanation. Just no. The silence on the other end stretched for so long I thought she'd hung up. Then she said, "You'll regret this, Katherine. When Emma grows up and asks why she doesn't have grandparents when she resents you for keeping her from us, you'll remember this moment." But what I would remember was Emma crying in the snow, and that was enough to keep my resolve solid. I hung up and blocked that number too. The months that followed our Christmas exodus became a masterclass in rebuilding. January arrived with its usual promises of fresh starts, but for Emma and me, it felt less like a resolution and more like a revolution. I enrolled her in an after-school art program at the community centre, the kind my parents would have scorned as beneath us. She thrived there, her natural creativity flourishing without the weight of someone else's expectations. The teacher, a retired artist named Bethany, told me Emma had real talent, the kind that came from seeing the world differently. I started therapy in February, finally ready to unpack 34 years of seeking approval from people incapable of giving it freely. Doctors Martinez, a soft-spoken woman who had her own history with family estrangement, helped me understand that my parents' love had always been transactional. Every gift had been a deposit requiring interest. Every kindness had been recorded in a ledger I could never balance. The freedom of understanding this was like learning to breathe after years of shallow gasps. Emma made friends quickly in her art class, particularly with a boy named Leo, whose two mums ran a bakery downtown. When they learnt we were on our own, they immediately folded us into their circle. Suddenly, we had regular dinner invitations, emergency childcare when I had to work late, and a standing order for day-old pastries that they insisted would just go to waste anyway. Their daughter Zoe became Emma's closest friend, and watching the girls play together, I saw my daughter's confidence rebuilding brick by brick. March brought unexpected challenges when Emma's teacher called to discuss some behavioural changes. She'd become protective of her possessions, anxious when classmates touched her things, and had started lying about having grandparents who lived far away. The teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, was gentle but concerned. I had to explain in broad strokes what had happened. She nodded knowingly and said she'd seen this before. Children processing rejection often created fantasy families to fill the void. We worked together on helping Emma feel secure without needing to fabricate stories. By April, our new life had developed its own rhythm. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, where Emma helped me pick out flowers for our kitchen table. Sunday afternoons at Maria's house, where Rosa taught Emma to make empanadas while telling stories about her own childhood. Weeknight dinners that were sometimes just cereal and fruit when I was too tired to cook, but eaten together at our small table while Emma told me about her day. It wasn't the life my parents had envisioned for me, but it was ours and it was real. The Mother's Day incident tested our new equilibrium. Emma's class was making cards, and she asked her teacher if she could make one for Miss Rosa instead of a grandmother. When asked why, Emma simply said, "She's the one who loves me like a grandma should." The teacher called to tell me, worried Emma was confused. But I knew better. Emma understood perfectly. She was already learning to recognize real love versus obligation, to value chosen family over blood relations that came with conditions. In May, I received unexpected news through Sarah. She called from a number I didn't recognize, speaking quickly, as if afraid I'd hang up. "Katherine, I'm not calling to pressure you. I wanted you to know Daniel and Jennifer are getting divorced. She's been having an affair with his law partner for 2 years. Your parents are devastated. Their perfect son with his perfect marriage imploding." The karma was so precise it felt fictional, but I took no joy in it. I simply thanked Sarah for telling me and ended the call. Their crisis wasn't my concern anymore. June brought Emma's first art show at the community centre. Each child got to display 3 pieces, and Emma had worked for weeks on her selections. A painting of our apartment with flowers in every window, a portrait of her and Zoe as superheroes, and a family portrait that included me, Maria's family, Leo's mums, and Miss Rosa, all holding hands under a rainbow. When people asked where her grandparents were in the picture, she said matter-of-factly, "I only draw people who love me." The clarity of her boundaries at 8 years old amazed me. The irony of Daniel's situation became clear when he called me in July, his voice rough with emotion I'd never heard from him before. "Katherine, I get it now," he said without preamble. "They're doing to me exactly what they did to you. Because Jennifer had an affair, I'm the failure. Because I'm getting divorced, I'm the embarrassment. Dad actually said I should have controlled my wife better. Can you believe that I could believe it? I'd lived it. But his awakening came too late for us to rebuild what had been broken. He wanted to reconnect, wanted Emma to know her cousins wanted the solidarity of shared rejection. But I couldn't forget how he'd participated in our exile, how he'd called Emma nobody important. I told him I wished him well, but that Emma and I had moved on. He accused me of being unforgiving, of punishing him for our parents' sins. Maybe he was right, or maybe I'd finally learnt to protect my peace with the same vigor I protected my daughter. Either way, I didn't apologize for the boundary. August was when I heard about the family reunion through the grapevine. My parents' annual gathering at the lake house, the one I'd attended every year since birth until now. Sarah texted me photos trying to be kind, showing me what I was missing. But what I saw was what I'd escaped. Forced smiles, stiff poses, children in uncomfortable clothes. They weren't allowed to get dirty. Emma and I spent that same weekend camping with Maria's family, getting absolutely filthy roasting marshmallows until midnight and falling asleep to the sound of actual laughter. The back-to-school season in September brought unexpected joy. Emma's confidence had transformed her from the anxious child who'd cried on my parents' porch into a leader among her peers. She organised playground games, helped newer students feel welcome, and stood up for a classmate being teased about his second-hand clothes. Her teacher sent home a note saying Emma had extraordinary empathy for her age. I thought about my parents' version of success measured in achievements and acquisitions, and felt proud that Emma was learning a different metric entirely. October surprised everyone when news reached us that my mother had been hospitalised with chest pains. Aunt Carol called, clearly expecting me to rush to her bedside. It's stress-related, she said meaningfully. The stress of losing both her children. The manipulation was obvious, but for a moment I wavered. Then Emma came in excited about her Halloween costume plans full of life and joy, and I remembered why I'd made this choice. I sent a card wishing her a speedy recovery, but didn't visit. Carol called me heartless. I called it self-preservation. My mother recovered, of course. The chest pains were anxiety, not a heart attack, though the family spoke of it as if she'd nearly died of a broken heart. The narrative served their purpose, painting me as the villain who'd driven poor mother to the hospital. But something interesting happened. People who knew me, who saw how Emma and I were thriving, began questioning the story they'd been told. Mrs. Chen mentioned that she'd seen us at the farmer's market looking happier than we'd ever looked at family functions. Small cracks in my parents' carefully constructed image began to show. November arrived with its landmines of approaching holidays. Emma asked if we were going to Grandma and Grandpa's for Thanksgiving. When I said no, she simply nodded and asked if we could have Thanksgiving with Maria's family instead. The ease of her acceptance showed how thoroughly she'd moved on. We did join Maria's family, and it was chaotic and loud, and involved 3 languages and too much food and absolutely no judgment. Emma fell asleep that night, telling me it was the best Thanksgiving ever because everyone was happy. The December anniversary of our exile approached with less dread than I'd expected. A full year of freedom had changed us both. Emma was thriving in ways she never had under the weight of my parents' expectations and corrections. I had started painting again, something I'd abandoned years ago when my mother called it a waste of time. We'd built a life that wasn't perfect or impressive by conventional standards, but it was authentic and ours. The approach of Christmas felt like a celebration of our independence rather than a reminder of rejection. Then on December 20th, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was a doll, expensive and pristine, the kind my mother always chose more for display than play. The card said, "Only for Emma from grandmother and grandfather." No message, no warmth, just an assertion of their roles. Emma looked at it with the same expression she'd have for a math problem. "Should I keep it?" she asked. I told her it was her choice. She thought for a moment, then said, "I'll give it to Toys for Tots. Some kid might really want it." The maturity of her response floored me. Christmas Eve arrived with a light snowfall almost exactly like the year before. But everything else was different. Emma woke up excited, not about visiting grandparents who might reject her, but about the party we were hosting ourselves. We'd invited Maria's family, Leo's mum's Miss Rosa, and 3 other single mothers I'd met in my support group along with their children. Our small apartment would be crowded, but it would be full of genuine love and acceptance. Emma had spent the morning helping me prepare, wearing the apron Rosa had given her, covered in flour from making cookies that actually got eaten this time. She chatted constantly about who would like which cookie, how Sophia would love the chocolate ones, how Leo was allergic to nuts, so we had to be careful with his. The consideration she showed for others, the natural way she thought about their needs and preferences, stood in sharp contrast to my parents' rigid expectations of proper behaviour. Around 4 o'clock, as I was setting up the folding table we'd borrowed to accommodate everyone, my phone rang. It was my mother's number unblocked, somehow probably through a new phone. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Maybe it was the anniversary, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe I just wanted to know I could handle whatever she had to say. Her voice was different than I'd ever heard it, smaller, uncertain. "Katherine," she began, and then stopped. I could hear her breathing the careful consideration of words. "We know you're not coming tonight. We didn't expect you to, but I wanted you to know we kept Emma's place at the table, just in case. We have presents for her under the tree, the ones we should have given last year. Your father doesn't know I'm calling. He'd be furious. But I needed you to know. I'm sorry." The last two words came out strangled, as if she'd never said them before. For a moment, I felt the pull of that apology, the child in me who'd waited 34 years to hear those words. But then Emma came running in, showing me a card she'd made for Rosa that said "World's Best Chosen Grandma," and the moment passed. "I'm sorry too, Mum," I said, meaning it. "I'm sorry you can't see who Emma really is. I'm sorry you can't love without conditions. I'm sorry you're missing out on an incredible granddaughter. But we've built a new life now, and there's no place in it for people who could turn away a crying child on Christmas Eve." She was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Then she said, "Daniel told us what you said, that family doesn't treat children like that. We didn't think we were treating Emma badly. We thought we were teaching you both a lesson about consequences. We thought you'd come back. We thought you needed us more than we needed you. But this year, with Daniel gone to the house so quiet, I realized we were the ones who needed you. We just didn't know how to show it without keeping score." The admission was more than I'd ever expected from her, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. "That's the problem, Mum," I said. "Love isn't supposed to keep score. It's not supposed to have prerequisites or require apologies to be earned. Emma knows she's loved now every single day without having to perform or achieve or meet anyone's standards. That's what I'm giving her, what you never gave me. The freedom to just be herself and know that's enough." I could hear her crying, now soft sobs that might have broken me once. But I had guests. Arriving a celebration to host a daughter to raise. "I need to go, Mum. People are coming over. People who love us." She made one last attempt. "It's not too late, Katherine. We could try again. We could do better." But I knew better. Some bridges once burned revealed that the crossing had always been treacherous, that the destination had never been worth the journey. "It is too late," I said gently. "Emma's moved on. I've moved on. We have a family now, just not the one you imagine. I hope you and Dad find peace with your choices. Goodbye, Mom." I hung up before she could respond, blocked the number again, and put the phone away. Later I would think about that conversation, analyze it, maybe even grieve for what could never be. But not tonight. Tonight was for celebration. The party was everything Christmas should be. Chaos and laughter, too much food, children running everywhere, adults drinking wine and swapping stories of survival and triumph. Emma was in her element, playing hostess, making sure everyone had cookies, proudly showing off her art from the past year. When Rosa arrived, Aunt Emma flew into her arms, calling out "Grandma Rosa," and the older woman's eyes filled with tears of joy, not manipulation. At one point in the evening, I stood back and watched the scene. Leo and Emma were teaching the younger kids a complicated hand-clapping game. Maria and her husband were dancing badly to Christmas music while their kids laughed at them. Rosa was teaching two of the single mums how to make her special hot chocolate. The apartment was too warm, too loud, too crowded, and absolutely perfect. This was family. Chosen, cherished, unconditional. Later, after everyone had gone home and Emma was asleep, I sat by our small tree with a cup of tea thinking about the year. We'd lost money, social standing, and blood relations. We'd gained freedom, authenticity, and a chosen family that showed up without keeping score. The trade had been more than worth it. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in fresh possibility. Somewhere across town, my parents sat in their perfect house with their perfect decorations, missing their children and grandchildren, prisoners of their own inflexible standards. The next morning, Christmas Day, Emma woke me up at dawn, bouncing with excitement. She didn't mention my parents once. Instead, she talked about how much fun the party had been, how Rosa had loved her card, how she couldn't wait to see what Santa brought. We opened presents, slowly savouring each one. Simple gifts, nothing expensive or impressive, but chosen with thought and wrapped with love. Emma's joy was pure and uncomplicated, untainted by performance anxiety or fear of judgment. After breakfast, we went to Maria's house for Christmas dinner. When we arrived, Emma ran straight to Rosa, who had made her a special dessert, just because she knew it was Emma's favourite. Watching my daughter be loved so freely, so enthusiastically, without having to earn it or deserve it, I felt the last of my doubt dissolve. This was what family was supposed to be. This was what Emma deserved. This was what we'd both been missing all along. That evening, as Emma played with her new toys, she said something that stopped me cold. "Mommy, remember last Christmas when those people were mean to us? I'm glad they were. Because if they hadn't been, we wouldn't have found our real family. Out of the mouths of babes came the truest wisdom." She was right. My parents' rejection had been a gift disguised as cruelty. It had freed us to find something better, something real, something ours. The months that followed solidified our new life. Emma continued to thrive, her confidence growing with each passing day. I got a promotion at work, finally able to focus, without the constant anxiety of seeking approval. We moved to a bigger apartment, one with room for all the chosen family gatherings we now hosted regularly. When people asked about grandparents, Emma would say simply, "I have Grandma Rosa. She chose me." And that was enough. More than enough. Sometimes I think about my parents alone in their perfect house, with their perfect things and their imperfect hearts. I hope they find peace, or at least understanding. But mostly I don't think about them at all. Because Emma and I have something they never offered, and therefore never earned the power of unconditional love, and the freedom that comes from knowing you're enough just as you are. And that silence, that absence of their criticism and conditions, has become the greatest gift they ever gave us. Looking back now, I realize that moment on their porch wasn't an ending, but a beginning. When I chose my daughter's tears over their approval, when I chose dignity over degradation, when I chose to walk away rather than bow down, I taught Emma the most important lesson I could ever give her. That love shouldn't hurt, that family shouldn't require performance, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to beg for something that should be freely given. What did you think of our story? Have you ever had to choose between your child's well-being and family approval? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose yourself and your children over toxic family dynamics. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss our stories about real life, real choices, and real strength. Thank you for being part of our chosen family here, where every story matters and every voice is valued. Wishing you all the love and acceptance you deserve this holiday season and always.